So Taika Waititi he hasn't seemed to be in many good graces lately. He got accused of queer baiting when he released Thor: Love and Thunder.
Why?
Because they put a lot of like pro LGBTQ articles out, and then it ended up not being a big important part of the story, which people called.
Oh, right.
Remember?
The lava creature
Yeah.
that had a gay relationship with
yeah.
another lava creature.
Yeah.
And the girl was a lesbian too.
Yeah.
One of the girls in it.
Glob. And Glob was seen in bed with another male Glob. It's revolutionary for the culture.
So now his new movie called Next Goal Wins is being called transphobic. And the funny thing is, a lot of this is going to fall into the same category as the ADL discussion because it becomes about tone policing someone's art, right? So the idea is there's a character named Jaya who's played by a real life, a non-binary actor or actress, a non-binary actor because that's a gender neutral term, named Kaimana. And Kaimana,
I looked into the IMDb and there's no other credits.
It's just that one credit.
Yeah.
Kaimana is non-binary, and Jaya, and I'm so sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this word. It's a Polynesian word. Fa'afa'fine.
I think it's just Fa'afafine.
Fa'afafine?
Third
Yeah, I couldn't
gender
get it.
present in Polynesian culture.
Yes.
The first openly trans woman to compete in a FIFA World Cup qualifier with
And-
other men.
And the idea here is that in the movie, the main character who is the replacement coach for this hopeless team of American Samoan soccer players, they use the term maliciously dead names.
Yes.
The character of Jaya.
It says Jaya initially baffles Thomas, the main character, with her gender identity of Fa'afafine, taken for granted in the Pacific as an important piece of local cultural heritage. He dead names her to motivate her during practice.
Okay.
Then, after she knocks him out, she's sent on the high road of apology to him for a reconciliatory heart-to-heart in which she smiles through an invasive inquiry about her genitals. The movie's emotional climax uses her transition with a vulgar blatancy of purpose, just so Thomas can give her the pep talk that instantly dissolves her dysphoria.
Here's the thing. I don't know if anybody here has ever played sports in their life, but if you've ever played sports in your life and you're a dude, you've
"Come
been
on,
called
ladies."
You've been called ladies
Yeah.
many a times, and it would be a ridiculous overreaction if you went up to your coach and just dropped him like a bad habit, because it would prove that you have no control over your emotions and that you don't understand what it means to regulate your feelings when you're going through something that is trying and difficult. It is bad. But what they're saying here is that the non-binary characters was completely justified to drop this dude.
Well, of course, that's their belief.
Yeah.
They believe that dead naming and misgendering is an act of violence, and a proper response is physical violence. Like, that's their genuine belief. So I'm not really surprised that the critics think this.
And here's the thing. At the end
But
of
it's
the
like,
day,
okay, big deal. A trans character wasn't worshipped like a god amongst the rest of humanity in a movie. Like, that just means that that's a normal person.
At
right?
the end of the day, you are going to price yourself, if you are a member of the LGBTQ community or you're trans, you're pricing yourself out of the stories because no one's going to want to write something, because any amount of depth given to it is going to get trashed with articles like these. So people are just going to say, nah, not bothering, not going to do it. I'll vaguely make references to it in the secondary term so that I can be like, so that you can mention it, but not be offensive enough to piss anybody off. It also refuses to allow them to make full-fledged characters because, God forbid, what if the trans person was the villain? That could happen, right? They're people. People are villains. It is not a trait of heterosexuality or homosexuality or any of these things to be evil. It's a human trait to be evil. So when you start telling people how or how not for them to write their characters, you're going to just make people see all of your critiques, because they are unjustified, as a minefield that they have to navigate. And instead of navigating that minefield, they're just going to ignore it completely, which will then screw you over, and you will not be represented in the movies as you so desperately want to be represented in the movies. And it's like, why would any writer want to go through with this. Like, you
only
have to
thing
want
that
to virtue
makes-
signal to such a high extent and be so full of yourself to think that you're the exception who's not going to get dragged.
Yeah, the only thing that makes a character compelling is having mortal flaws. But they believe that anything a trans person does that is morally questionable can solely be blamed on discrimination and oppression.
Which makes their actions justified.
Which
rather
justifies
than,
what they did.
Yeah. And sometimes the beauty of it is that the actions aren't justified. And that's the point, right? That the character now has to answer for those behaviors.
It's also somewhat realistic because, like, imagine putting female hormonal rage inside a male body. That's a recipe for bloodshed.
Yeah.
You know that. Dangerous stuff that you're messing with in Mother Nature. I don't know. These other critics are just saying, like, the trans character exists to serve Thomas's narrative, but, like, that goes for any protagonist. Like, the secondary supporting characters literally do exist to serve the protagonist's narrative.
Yeah.
That's how any story works. You just wanted the trans person to be the protagonist.
They always,
because you think you're the main character of reality.
Yeah, that's
like,
at the end of the day. And any secondary character, especially if they have those traits, what they say is like they didn't give it enough time. They didn't flesh out their story enough. They want the movie to be 9 hours long so that they can go and look at what they had for breakfast when they were 13 so that they can justify their actions. Well, that's not the way movies work. That's not the way editing works when you're putting these things together.
How would be the right way to do this movie? Would be my question.
Yeah, you do it just like this and you leave it.
Well, my issue with the movie is that when I watched the trailer, it made multiple jokes about, like, against the coach being white. Like, that they were, you know, degrading him for his race in, like, a funny haha way. And when we saw that preview in the theaters, there were people, like, sitting next to us in the audience, like, laughing at those jokes. And I was like, that's kind of uncomfortable that you think that's funny. But it's just more divisive bullshit that Hollywood is giving us.
I just wish that everybody could when they make fun of the straight white characters, I've just kind of accepted that they're going to do that, right?
I don't appreciate when this is like not a take that most people are going to be willing to have, but you know, when you put trans characters in movies and TV shows, it's distracting. It's distracting because everyone knows
Everyone's on edge.
Yeah, like everyone is on edge, like about how that identity is going to be tiptoed around in the narrative, and like, are you going to acknowledge the fact that that person is trans or not? Like the trans Barbie in the Barbie movie, that was just sprinkled in there with no context, and it was distracting and didn't belong in there. Especially because this is supposed to be like an ideal world where mistakes don't happen. So is there some kind of like platonically ideal obese Barbie or trans Barbie? That was distracting. It's distracting when there's the trans character in Euphoria. It's distracting with this one too. Like, it's not something that just blends into the crowd.
Yeah.
Like, it demands attention.
Well, also, if the guy makes light of the person's gender identity, but then learns a lesson from it, and they come together, isn't that the point that they talk about how they both learn something from each other at the end? Is the idea that that's
I think that's a stupid moral of the story anyway.
Do people want a movie where it's not acknowledged and this person doesn't face any adversity? Because isn't the whole point that trans people face adversity, and that's why they're upset about it?
Yeah.
Right.
About the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just weird. They say the IndieWire comment says, despite a lovely performance from Kaimana, who has the most dramatic material to tackle. Well, if the secondary character has the most dramatic material to tackle, you haven't written your movie properly.
No.
That should not be. They should be supplementing the larger story, which should have the most dramatic arc. Now that could be the reviewer. We've all got our biases, right? Like that could be the reviewer's opinion of who has the most dramatic material to tackle. It says, Waititi's treatment of gender is flippant because it's not the most important thing in the story. Therefore, they're saying it's flippant.
Right.
Yeah, I would hate that as like someone who's Middle Eastern. And I mean, I did grow up like every terrorist in the movies were Middle Eastern, but it made sense. I would hate that there's like this whole group of people like, you can't make fun of Persian people and Middle Eastern people and blah, 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 because that does build resilience and it creates like depth in people, and it's kind of part of the experience of being that. So it kind of feels a little bit like you're acting like we're victims before we've even been victimized a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like what you mentioned
Clearly
earlier.
the actor didn't have an issue with it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Should that not be enough?
I
Enough
mean,
of an endorsement?
Yep.
there could be more
Great point.
comments made later that said they might have a problem with it down the line, but they didn't say anything. It's like the guy from from Gran Torino, the actor from Gran Torino who never had a problem with what happened with the movie Gran Torino, didn't find it racist until like last year or a couple years ago.
Why would that be found racist?
Because
He uses racial slurs against the, like, what is it, Clint Eastwood, right?
Yeah.
He uses racial slurs against that guy's character.
yeah.
Kind of like as a term of endearment, almost at certain points. No, if I
The point is
remember
he grows by
correctly.
the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of his character. It's part of the whole development of Clint Eastwood's character. And even though he like uses these terms, it doesn't mean that he doesn't end up helping that group of people in the end. And it, you know. It's like part
But
of-
the point is the actor never had a problem with it and only spoke highly of everyone until like a couple years ago, and it became fashionable to have a grievance with something. I mean, we see that every day with actors who 20 years later suddenly have a problem with something they starred in back in the day and find it offensive. I don't know why anyone would want to make art now when you're going to have to worry about, like, I can't wait for 20 years from now when Mary decides all those years later that stuff I said was offensive on this show. She's like, you know what?
The dossier is growing by the day, Brett.
She's like, you know what? That Taryn Manning was right and Brett's wrong. And cereal should be eaten with the milk poured in first.
Aggressive skates are corporate.
Exactly. Like it's going to end up down the line.
Cereal before milk, and it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. That's all I have to say for today.
Yes. Mic drop.
But when you're a director now, when you're a director or a writer, you're under this microscope. Like, it's one thing to be the director, but to be the writer, like, people are going to hyper focus on every aspect of what you do. And I blame a lot of that.
He's a really annoying director, though.
He's awful. But I blame a lot of this on the kind of critical lens that the humanities departments have put people into right now. I'll never forget this old guy who's telling me about how he had to take like a class on feminism, like feminism in cinema when he was in college, and he was like talking about how the dog fights in Star Wars were like an allegory for rape.
Oh,
And just like, you know, it's that's everyone is looking through.
They're just getting paid to spin their wheels.
Yeah.
Without creating
And
anything.
like de-escalates or like takes away from the reality and severity of actual.
Yeah.
I don't know if you say
But it used to be fun. Like we used to, like, I've talked about how, like, look, back in the day, nerds would go back and forth about superhero lore and stuff, and it was great, right? And everybody understood that you met them on the same wavelength, right? So you were both fans of these properties, so you could have these heated debates about who is the best who would win in this fight, and everyone understood that that's just, you know, part of the game, and those debates were always, maybe they got heated and maybe people felt like somebody was slighted, but it was never taken to the level of severity that these things are now, because they're not debating the movies as much as like what we're doing here, which is debating the cultural impact of the social issues which are being discussed or at least alluded to in these films. So if I was a director, if I was a writer, I would just say, don't do any of it. don't do any of it. Like at least the ones that are hot button issues right now. Start looking for like vintage issues. Like, well, what's a vintage issue we can go back and worry about? I can't, like,
how far back are we talking?
Like 20 years. Like what was a big issue?
I saw like an old school ad of like a man measuring his wife's like leg length so he could figure out how tall the ironing board he should purchase would be.
That's amazing. That's amazing. See, that's
with or without heels on.
Depends on your wife. Yeah.
All right. Well, why is she wearing heels to iron clothes? That's
Because
the real
that's
question.
what
Women used to
1950s
care
housewives
about what they
did.
looked like.
Take me back, as they say. As all the
Even when their husbands weren't home, they had to be wearing the heels.
well, you got to
Gotta
keep
be on your
at all
toes. Literally keep
times.
you on your toes.
yeah, and you got to build up a tolerance for the pain is love. As they say. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.